Good evening, everyone, and welcome to night number 7 of the Preservation Alliance's Spring Speaker Series. Happy to have you here. I think this is the first night of this series where it's actually felt like spring. So I hope everybody has enjoyed that today. And welcome to all of the Preservation Alliance members who've joined us tonight as a member-supported organization. We really appreciate your support. And if you're not a member, please go to our website and take a look at the options, and I hope you'll join us as a member of the Preservation Alliance. So with us this evening are 2 members of the Preservation Alliance team. We have Vinnie Cheng, our manager of tours and events, who organized this series, and also Hannah Stark, our director of policy and communications, who will be handling the Q&A with our speaker after the conclusion of her talk. So let me introduce tonight's speaker. Her name is Danielle DiLeo Kim, AIA, who is the president and CEO of PHILADELPHIA250. Prior to taking the helm at PHILADELPHIA250, Danielle was engaged in the design and realization of institutional and cultural buildings, citywide and campus master plans, and community engagement processes across Philadelphia, including places such as the Salvation Army's Kroc Center, the Mann Center for the Performing Arts, the Planning Commission's Philadelphia 2035 initiative, PIDC's Lower Schuylkill Master Plan, and the original Centennial District Master Plan in West Fairmount Park. Danielle also is currently serving as the president-elect of AIA Philadelphia. So with that impressive bio, Danielle, I will turn the floor over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. It's pleasure to be here and to see so many folks on the call. I'm really honored and very thankful for this opportunity. So I like to start our conversations and our talks with this photo because I think it really embodies the spirit of Philadelphia 250. We are a nonprofit organization that is bringing the People's Commemoration to the people and neighborhoods of Philadelphia in 2026. And this photo is from 2022. So we have been working hard for a number of years in gathering community support and awareness and really encouraging an inclusive and transformational 250th in 2026. I should also point out that this lecture might be a little different than what you've heard in past lectures, because I know that folks are often talking about history or very significant archives or buildings or landscapes, whereas I'm going to be talking certainly some history, but then also looking towards the future of what we're planning. This is a little bit of an overview about what I'm going to cover today and the arc of things, and really starting with this concept of the opportunity of anniversaries and how significant they are, and taking you through looking back at history and how Philadelphia has always played a leading role. Paul touched on my professional history. I'm going to talk about that in terms of how that influences the approach we're taking today at Philadelphia 250. A little interlude about the spirit of place, which is something that I really think is important, that we should hold near and dear to our hearts and minds when we're thinking about how to celebrate this city and our city's relationship to history of the country at large. I'll talk about how this 250th will be different and unique than past anniversaries. And then, of course, how do we know we've achieved success? So I'm just take you through that today. So starting with really the opportunities of anniversaries. And, as this slide shows you, Philadelphia, and I don't need to tell any of you here, is the birthplace of American democracy. And every 50 year, or certainly every major anniversary, Philadelphia has played a leading role. So when we think about the opportunities of anniversaries, we like to say at Philadelphia 250 that these major milestone 50-year celebrations are typically once in a generation, maybe even once in a lifetime opportunities. And when you celebrate an anniversary, it's an opportunity to, of course, reflect on the past, look at all of the things that have come before, good and bad, things that need to be changed, and to also really take time to capture community voices and capture community reflections as well, so that this is something that is inclusive of all those of us who are recognizing this moment in time. It's also a moment to really stop and state and show your values and at the moment in time, in terms of what types of programming we might want to put on, or events that we might want to have, and the approach that we go about planning those things. So all of that feeds into kind of stating our values as, for us, Philadelphia 250 as an organization, but also even larger as a city. Of course, anniversaries are a time to look ahead and think about charting a new course. And you'll hear me talk at length later on tonight about leaving a legacy, right? It is a moment in time to leave things behind, whether those are physical, capital buildings and projects typically have happened in past anniversaries, or whether there's something even maybe less tangible, but more significant in terms of investment in the future of people, the future of neighborhoods, businesses in Philadelphia and beyond. So I'm going to kind of cover kind of all of this as I go through my presentation, these overarching opportunities of anniversaries. So we're going to start kind of looking at each of the former anniversaries, but I'm going to start in 76 and go backwards in time, and you'll kind of understand why I'm doing it this way. So the bicentennial, I imagine I don't have the ability to have all your faces up on the screen, but I imagine that some of you may have been alive, may have participated, may remember fondly, or maybe not so fondly, the bicentennial. It was a distributed model in the sense of Philadelphia wasn't the kind of epicenter of activity in 1976. And even this big photo here, what most people tend to say they remember the most about 1976 was the tall ships in New York Harbor. Philadelphia had a bit of a difficult experience and association with the bicentennial. Mayor Rizzo wasn't exactly really encouraging folks to come. In fact, he actually brought in the National Guard. There were protests. There was a lot of racial strife that was going on in the city in 76 as well. But there were some nice legacies that came out of that. Hold on. Okay. So when we're talking about 1976, the legacy projects that did come out of that were some of the ones you can see on the screen. So the African American Museum of Philadelphia was the first African American museum in the country that was supported by a city. The Mann Center for the Performing Arts was built in 1976, also as a legacy project. Some of the public art that you see around the city, such as the Love statue, Love sculpture, and also the clothespin sculpture. The Mummers Museum was a 76 thing. Additionally, the Living History Museum, which is currently now where WHYY is based out of, was also a legacy project of 1976. So that was pretty heavy in terms of capital projects and capital investments that the city and sometimes others gave us gifts. I mean, the Love sculpture and the clothespin sculpture were gifts. Jumping back to 1926, another 50 years behind, the sesquicentennial was more of an exhibition kind of model. So it was a 6-month exhibition from May through October. It took place in FDR Park. It was the reason that FDR Park was completed and created into a park. It had been mostly marshland and wetland. It needed to be turned into a fairground. So that work was done in order to host that. Some kind of this photo here, you can see it was an enormous 80-foot replica of the Liberty Bell, which was covered in 26,000 light bulbs. And it was at the gateway of Broad and Pattison, kind of where the NRG station is right now, if you go to the Stadium District. So this bell was one of the things that was created for the sesquicentennial. Some of the other projects that were done and created in 1926, well, this this view here of FDR Park includes the lake, and then also the Swedish Museum slightly in the distance, the boathouse that was created, the gazebo. All of those things were part of the original sesquicentennial fair. And the image on the left is the Benjamin Franklin Bridge, which was opened for connection across the Delaware River on July 1st, 1926. So of course, both FDR Park and the Benjamin Franklin Bridge will turn 100 in 2026. The Centennial exhibition might be the one that you are most familiar with, depending on, because it was the most successful of the 3 major anniversaries that Philadelphia has hosted. You can see on the screen here, like so many people are packing the foreground of the National Art Gallery, which is what it was called at the time, on opening day. A quarter of the population came to Philadelphia in the 6-month time that the Centennial exhibition was opened. It opened on May 10th, 1876, and ran through October. It was a time in which Philadelphia was known as the workshop of the world. So we were the natural host for things because we were coming out of the Industrial Revolution, or we were in the midst of the Industrial Revolution. And Philadelphia really was the place where so much of that manufacturing and ingenuity was happening. So West Fairmount Park was identified as the fairgrounds area. And then you can see that these massive buildings were created intended to be temporary from the very beginning onto the landscape. So the main exhibition hall and machinery hall are the 2 largest buildings that you can see on the right side of the page. They were enormous buildings, and then the 3rd largest building was the Agricultural Hall, which is kind of off to the left. Memorial Hall was built it was built to be a permanent building and remain after the Centennial. It was over 37 countries participated through either of gifts or creating of their own exhibits in the buildings throughout the exhibition. I think there were 26 states. I think I have that on my next slide. So this is a map, an analysis map of the exhibition grounds on the left and what currently remains today. And you can see the outlines of the buildings and the enormity of them and where they are on the landscape of West Fairmount Park today. So the exhibition hall on the right was the largest building in the world at the time. It measured 460 feet in width. And then I was told a long time ago that it was 1,776 feet long. But when I looked it up recently, it said it was 1880. So I don't know what's the right number. I'm sure one of you on this call knows exactly the length of it. Anyway, it was a very long building, as you can see. The Centennial Art Gallery, as it was called, is now Memorial Hall. It was intended to be an art gallery, and it is where the PMA and University of the Arts both kind of were birthed at the time. So both University of the Arts and the PMA are celebrating their 150th anniversary in 2026. The lovely little Ohio House, which was kind of a left behind state building. So there were 26 state pavilions. Ohio was one of the state pavilions that was created along, you can see on the left of the screen, those little tiny buildings. They were all various states. Ohio never went anywhere. So after the exhibition, the Centennial ended, a lot of the buildings were disassembled and reused for parts. Some of them were actually physically picked up and relocated to different places around the country. A lot of them ended up in Spring Lake, New Jersey. There's one of the houses became a small theater in Central Park. So these things have kind of had other lives in other places after the Centennial. And then in terms of the landscape that remains, you can see that Avenue of the Republic was the main north-south, or excuse me, east-west on the north side of the main buildings. That is, some people call it North Concourse today, but it's been technically renamed to be Avenue of the Republic to make a nod to the Centennial. Belmont Avenue is still there, and then the Horticulture Hall connecting to the Temperance Fountain. That alley of trees still remains today as well. And the trees, I believe, were a gift after the Centennial. They're not from the Centennial, but that spine, that alley of horticulture was created during the Centennial. Some of the debuts people like to talk about, the things that happened at the Centennial made it so exciting. The light bulb was first presented there. The telephone was there. The Corliss steam engine was helping to power many of the things that were going on at the exhibition at the time. The arm and the torch of the Statue of Liberty was shown at the Centennial. First chain link bicycle was there. Bananas made their debut in North America at the Centennial exhibition. And then the women's pavilion, I just like to point out, was the first pavilion that was a women's exhibition, the first structure at an international exhibition to highlight the work of women and exhibits that were created by women. And the women were instrumental in helping to raise money for the entire exhibition itself. They raised over $2.8 million that went towards the success of making the Centennial happen. So I share all of that because it's exciting to think about like what Philadelphia has done, what we could do in the future, and the legacy of what these anniversaries mean for the city. So I'm going to jump a little bit to talking about my professional history and how that feeds into Philadelphia 250 and the work that we're doing, thinking about a citywide plan. And the project that I thought we would start with, since we just ended with, was the Centennial District. So at the time, I was working for MGA Partners, which is an architecture firm that's award-winning design firm that's still active today in the city. It is the successor firm of Mitchell Jurgala, for those of you who know the firm Mitchell Jurgala. And I was working, this is fresh out of grad school, I was working with Alan Greenberger, who was a partner, the design partner at the time at MGA Partners. He and I were the lead, he was the project, the lead partner, and I was the project manager of this project. And it was the first time that anyone had looked at the Centennial District as a destination. So this was a 20-year master plan. We met with all the various institutional stakeholders. We met with community stakeholders to envision what could a family destination park look like in West Fairmount Park. And you can see kind of near the Belmont Plateau and circle that's there, that we actually proposed in adding an additional venue, because the venues that are there right now are really far apart, and you don't really tend to do, like, you don't necessarily go to the Please Touch Museum, the zoo, and the Mann Center all in one day, because those things are a half a mile apart, at least, from each other, if not more than that. And they happen at different times of day, and the audiences are different. So we felt like there needed to be actually like more venues in the site as well, because the landscape was kind of empty. We thought that there needed to be more structure around recreational fields. So you can see that in front of Memorial Hall, we were proposing there to be more recreational fields. And we actually proposed eliminating South Concourse Drive, which I still think is an excellent idea. Has not been done yet to date, but for a number of reasons, it has not happened. But that was one of the big kind of infrastructure moves, was to actually take out some of the roads in the park, because there are so many redundant roads in West Fairmount Park. And you can see here that the last paragraph on the Centennial District plan was to be a 20-year plan. So the idea was that this would wrap up in 2026, in time for the semi-quincentennial. So I've been thinking about 2026 since at least 2005, because we did this plan in 2005. This is a slide of just a moment of like things that are important to me as an architect and as a engaged citizen. Is you can see there's this includes the Kroc Center, this includes the Mann Center. Those are two significant building projects that I worked on as an architect in Philadelphia. The other two projects, one at the bottom left is a Montessori school. I was the founder of Clementine Montessori in 2010. And it really happened through a number of community and friends and family coming together to make that happen. And now the school is like thriving and has a new location and has actually, there's a whole community of Montessori schools that have popped up to serve preschool and young families in Philadelphia since then. There's probably at least a half a dozen Montessori schools. So it's exciting to be part of that. Community engagement is really critical to all of the planning work that I've done to date in terms of really asking for feedback from designs and plans and making sure that that's all genuinely represented. So I share all of this to kind of give you some, understanding of the values that we're bringing to the work at Philadelphia 250. Paul mentioned that I worked on Philadelphia 2035. So for a number of years, I was a consultant to the City Planning Commission when the City Planning Commission was writing the first comprehensive plan since 1960. So Ed Bacon was the last author and his team of a comprehensive plan. And under the Nutter administration, it was required that we create a new comprehensive plan for the city. I was the manager of that project for the Planning Commission, and we looked at all the different aspects that go into a comprehensive plan, from neighborhoods and economic development to transit and infrastructure to historic preservation and open space, things like that. So these are some of the images. One of the things that we really thought about when we were creating this comprehensive plan, these are straight out of the plan itself, was to make this legible and friendly to the general public. Because if you've worked at a planning commission in the past or you've seen comprehensive plans, they're usually like 500-page documents, and they're all black and white, and there's no graphics, and they're not something that any public member would ever pick up. So we really came up with themes, we came up with colors, we came up with this idea of these 3 themes, which was Thrive, Connect, and Renew. And everything was branded and put together like that. And the idea of these 18 planning districts across the city, where smaller plans would then be developed at a more local level, as opposed to just an overarching city level. One of the areas that we focused in on was historic preservation. And I was just looking at my citywide vision plan a minute ago because I had it at my desk, and I was like, I opened it up to see what we had written about historic preservation. And, the general recommendations that we put in there, this is in 2013, were, to preserve and protect architecturally and historically significant buildings, landscapes, structures, cemeteries, to make sure that things were on the register. This was a time when the Historic Commission had really no capacity, no power, no money. So we were really starting to bring awareness to the importance of historic preservation. We, of course, asked for increased funding and support. There was some recommendations around heritage tourism as well. And I think really this plan and so many of the efforts of 2035 that came out of the Planning Commission were, just really snowballed after that. And I know that the Historic Preservation Task Force came out of that, and all the work that Preservation Alliance has done over many, many years with the Planning Commission and the various efforts around historic preservation. And I like to think some of it is certainly connected back to this. This is one of the renderings that came out of Philadelphia 2035. The purple buildings on here were the proposed developments that we wanted to see happen, or that we knew were going to happen. So you could, the bottom one, if you look at the very bottom one on the end of Broad and Washington, the site on the left is been developed. That's I can't remember what they call it, Lincoln Square or something like that, I think it is. Has to do with because Lincoln's casket actually came into the rail terminal that is in that shed building that's located at Broad and Washington. So there is a historical connection to President Lincoln at that site. That development has happened. That's where the Sprouts and the Target is in the commercial building. And then across on the east side of Broad and Washington, that's the development site that's currently under development right now. So that's just one example of projects that were just like germinations of idea, or we knew that they were really critical sites, like a gateway like that we knew we needed to have development on. So that was some of the I just point that one project out as an example of some of the projects that have since happened and or are happening, which is what I think is so exciting about big planning, which is what I love to do, which is to kind of create these frameworks and then hope that some of it happens, and certainly be completely flexible and know that it isn't going to play out that way in all cases, but hopefully things generally go in informed directions. So I'm just going to take this minor interlude here to talk about something called Spirit of Place, and this definitely was something that really was important to me as as a young architect when I was in school, and then doing a lot of traveling as part of my architectural career, which is really starting to understand like what is, and then the Latin word for this is genus loci. Means spirit of place. And it's essentially like it represents the sensibilities that people have of what makes a place truly unique. Like, how is Philadelphia different than Pittsburgh? And what are the things that contribute to that, those differences? So understanding who we are as a city and what makes us unique also goes into how do we recognize and celebrate that when we have major anniversaries. So, I really like this photo, and I have to say, I don't know where I found this photo or where the proper photo recognition is. But what I think is so powerful about this is that the typology of Philadelphia, these row homes, is so kind of relentless. And this is obviously from South Philly looking north, and not all of the city is like this, but so much of the city is comprised of these mostly like 2 to 3 story row houses that are anywhere from 10 to 15 feet wide, brick facades, flat roofs, have a porch or some sort of stoop elevated off the street. And it makes for a very like democratic city. As the birthplace of American democracy, to have this like very logical and kind of uniform way of living, I think is something really interesting about Philadelphia in terms of the typology of the city and the rational order of the grid for a city that represents order and values and equality, that I think we should embrace more about who we are as a spirit of this city in terms of the typology in which we live. I threw in some of my own drawings because I think it's fun for people to see that. These are from my neighborhood in Fairmount. And I think this is interesting because these are examples of like neighbors taking ownership of public space, and this happens all over the city, not just in Fairmount. The little street lights, sometimes I show this drawing and people think it's, from South Philly or wherever. So this idea of community, right, and kind of owning public space happens through these small little interventions. This other image on the right is from the Corinthian Gardens, which is right near the Eastern State Penitentiary, which is also around the corner from my house. And an amazing, amazing habitat of flora and fauna. And then, of course, the community garden that's there as well, and how Philadelphia has this spirit of, finding these vacant properties or these left behind odd spaces and turning them into community hubs. Form and light is one of those other like spirit of place things that experts talk about when they're, describing like what makes a place unique. And we've all seen those like incredibly fiery and intense sunsets that happen here in Philadelphia. And typically this is one of those late winter fiery sunsets that happened. And, I don't know, I'm sure they happen all over the country, but there's something that is very powerful when you're in certain parts of the city and you can see the juxtaposition of both the kind of industrial and community buildings with also with the futuristic buildings as well. There's also, this really bold and maybe revolutionary planning that Philadelphia has done, and of course has caused harm in terms of clearing out huge parts of the city. But both the Parkway and Independence Mall area were parts of urban renewal in terms of major swaths of the city were cleared to create these spaces. And now they are truly like incredibly iconic. They're some of the most iconic spaces in the city, and they become the public spaces where so many of these, particularly for 2026, these major events will happen. The Parkway, we know, the top of the Art Museum steps, and then of course, Independence Mall, where everything began, almost 250 years ago. I put this building in for all of you historic preservation folks. This was a drawing I did a long time ago of Furness's Fine Arts Library on Penn's campus. But, you know, we also have a history of building some pretty impressive buildings. There's City Hall, right? The largest stone masonry building in the entire world. All these buildings by Furness are incredibly muscular and heroic. So there's that spirit as well. We have these humble houses that we live in, and then we also have these unbelievable cathedrals and places of learning and places of government as well. And, you know, and then finally the cultural, the ephemeral things, the cultural, the technological, the history, all the things that the sports, the food, the scene here in Philadelphia that makes living in Philadelphia, if you have the means or are able to participate in these things, so much joy that we all really share. And how do we capture and make sure that the diversity of all of that is also part of what we celebrate in 2026. Okay, so I don't know if I mentioned it, but I will now. So I have myself and my colleague Nika Brown, who's also on this call. She and I have been working with and or for Philadelphia 250 since 2018. And I'm actually going to go back in time to that period of time and show you some of the initial work that was happening. And the path that took me to Philadelphia 250 was after I left the Planning Commission, I had my own consultancy for about 6 years, and I was doing a lot of community, public, urban design and public realm work. And I was asked, because of my experience and background, to help work on a vision plan for what 2026 could be like. So I was hired as a consultant originally, and my role was to work and manage the design work with Kieran Timberlake, who had been hired at the time, actually was graciously offered their pro bono services to do some of this envisioning work for the organization. So we worked for over 18 months analyzing the entire region, city, and then parts of the city, and looking at where things would happen, what types of improvements need to occur, and how that could all work. So I just wanted to kind of show you some of the analysis work that was done and the thinking about this that is also kind of informing the stuff we're doing now. So we looked at everything of, this is a map of Philadelphia and slightly out of the region as well, thinking about how are people going to come when they come to 2020, when they come to Philadelphia in 2026, there's different ways they're going to arrive. Americans might drive, international visitors who are coming here might take trains. And of course, people are flying, and they'll also be flying as well. And they might be using trains to go up and down the coast of North America. So where are people coming? So we were looking at the different types of transit hubs. We were looking at if people are driving, like what types of infrastructure needs to be improved, so that we can encourage there to be people parking kind of outside the city, so not everybody's driving into the city. So this is just a map of like existing transit lots that could be made larger or could have been created into garages that could hold, greater numbers of people, so we could encourage there to be kind of park and ride scenarios. We were starting to look at what types of infrastructure projects, transportation projects would need to be done to ensure that people would have a pleasant experience, that things could be easy. So we started looking at, again, kind of major stations or gateway locations that would need improvements. I like to point out this one, which is the first one here, which says I-95 Sector A improvements, which sounds really boring and like, what does that mean? It's essentially to recognize in Sector B improvements that I-95 will still be under construction and renovation in 2026. And how do we, are there parts of that construction that should be accelerated so that we're not creating, additional traffic jams or slowing traffic experience down by people who are choosing to drive. So even as simple things like that compared to, some of these longer term plans, which were, real improvements to stations. We were, also living in a little bit of fantasy land to some degree, thinking about, oh, let's extend the Broad Street line. If we could extend the Broad Street line to the Navy Yard by 2026. And that was in 2018. So it wasn't entirely off the table at that point. It is most definitely off the table at this point, just in case anyone's wondering. So looking at those kinds of things, we were looking at major development projects. This is similar to that axonometric I showed you of the city, where we were looking at Philadelphia 2035 and major development projects, looking at like what's coming down the pike. Are there opportunities to make sure these projects are completed in time for 2026? And I think number 3 is probably, no, not 3, 2 is the Penn's Landing Park. And we're not even sure that that project will get completed in time for 2026. There might be a part of it that's done. So again, like these big capital projects, even when you try to plan far out, if there isn't dollars, political will, these things just don't, it's very hard to make sure that they happen in time. Okay. We looked at regional plans. This was the idea of like, well, there needs to be activity in downtown and in Brandywine, Valley Forge, Germantown, Washington Crossing. All these places are historically significant. And there is some of that already happening. I can let you know that there's definitely people planning in those areas. This plan, again, was looking at how do we make sure that there's neighborhood activity all across the city, and does some of that neighborhood programming or artwork or whatever it is that's possibly created, manifest itself in the center where there might be increased visitorship. So thinking about a citywide model even back then. Looking at how we're going to connect these spaces. I put this slide in here specifically because it talks about the connection that could exist between Philadelphia and Camden, which is a new renewed conversation. I know that's going on right now. So just kind of pointing out some of the things that we've been thinking about for a long time. Kieran Timberlake did these renderings, and again, they're very kind of experiential, not very specific about what you could see or experience in 2026. There's even some blob buildings. So back in 2018, we thought we might need some blob buildings by 2026. I'm not so sure that we do, but those were some of the ideas then. We then looked at this whole plan, all these ideas. We had very ambitious spreadsheets and proposals and analyses that were all done. And essentially, we recommended that there be strategic investments in these different areas. So straight up investments in cultural, economic, and legacy issues, investments in program areas where things might happen, like the Centennial District or Germantown or the sports complex, making sure that there's signature events and experiences, which I can tell you there will be. And then what types of investments do we need around transportation and technology? I think we're maybe a little bit behind that in terms of planning, but we'll see what we can maybe get done in the next 2 years. I'm going to move along a little faster here. Okay, so now here we are at Philadelphia 250 in today's time. So let's fast forward in the last 5 or 6 years. How are we thinking about the 250th might be different than past anniversaries? And this is where these values that I have on the screen here really kind of play into that. So our approach is definitely unique. You'll hear about that in a second in terms of who's included and why we're doing it the way we're doing it. We're thinking about 2026 as a citywide and year-long event. So not a 6-month exhibition style model, but a more citywide distributed model that happens over the course of the entire year. There will be federal, state, and city actors and stakeholders that are already planning and that are part of things. 2026 this time around, semi-quincentennial coincides with FIFA World Cup games, which is a huge opportunity and a complete shifter in terms of how that impacts the semi-quincentennial, which did not happen in past anniversaries. There wasn't something this monumental that was happening. We've got some themes that are inspiring us as well. We're doing programming, not just projects. And of course, we're thinking about legacies and how we're leaving things behind. So Philadelphia 250, I'm going to now really hone in on Philadelphia 250 as an organization. This is the organization that I'm the CEO of, and that we have a board of directors and a growing staff. We're adding to our staff every day. We just made a new offer for a community engagement manager to join us. So our North Star at Philadelphia 250 is to make sure that America celebrates the most inclusive and transformational 250th in Philadelphia. And in order to do that, we have so many things that we need to build upon. But as the birthplace of American democracy and as a city of firsts, we really believe that we need a bold and ambitious vision to make sure that we can achieve this idea of inclusion and transformation. Our overarching mission, if that's our North Star, our mission is to really is to do this with and for the people and neighborhoods of Philadelphia, and to make sure that we are providing the ways that the 250th can manifest itself across the city. So we talk about the People's Commemoration as being the way that people experience the 250th out in the neighborhoods. Our byline at Philadelphia 250, you can see on our logo, is by the people, for all people. And that is very much true to the way that we have designed everything that we're proposing to do, and the way that we're engaging with folks as we go, which is really to make sure that the 250th is something that happens by and for, and isn't something that feels like it's happening to them, which often is something that folks say when we have major events in Philadelphia, it feels like. So just talking about for a moment the three areas that Philadelphia 250 focuses on. We play two roles at Philadelphia 250. We essentially are both a source and a resource. So we are a source of our own 250th related programming that will take place all around the city. And we're a resource for organizations that want to figure out how to get involved. So as a resource, we are convening folks to help participate in programs. We're encouraging them to think about ways that they can get involved in neighborhoods, and encouraging folks to think about legacy projects that they can do themselves. I'm going to go into more detail about the specifics of our programming in just a minute, but I wanted to just let you understand that like our focus is really around programs. It's around these place-based experiences. And then the third pillar is about legacy. So we talk about people, place, and purpose at Philadelphia 250. Many of you might be aware that there are, as I mentioned, federal, state, and local entities planning the 250th across the entire country. This is a national celebration, a federal celebration. So the Federal Commission is America 250. The Federal Commission has asked each of the states to create their own state commissions, and I believe almost every state has created a state commission at this point. Our state commission is called America 250 PA. Philadelphia 250 is actually the longest organization that has been in existence and planning for the 250th, even prior to the Federal Commission being formed, and even prior to our state commission being formed. Because as you can see, we've been planning for many years, and the organization itself was actually formed in 2011, and has gone through a number of iterations into where we are today. But I wanted to let you know that there are different tiers of planning happening. We're all independent organizations, yet there's a lot of communication and coordination across. In terms of what's happening at the city level, there are a number of 2026 partners, because Philadelphia is really will be the epicenter of activity in 2026. As a city, we are so much more further ahead and organized and visionary about what our plans are for 2026 than other cities. And I can say this with some relative level of confidence because I've talked to, and other of my colleagues have talked to, partners beyond Philadelphia. But I wanted to just point out that there really are, these are some of the early organizations that have been planning for what 2026 will feel like. You can see kind of at the top of the rainbow there, the tourism organizations that are responsible for both bringing conventions and promoting the city. Visit Philadelphia and the CVB and the Visitor Center have been instrumental in thinking about what 2026 will be like. From an economic development standpoint, the Chamber of Commerce, the city itself, of course, and the other chambers of commerce. Philadelphia 250 has started engaging the business improvement districts, the CDCs, and the civic associations as well to think about how is this an economic development opportunity. The major events that are going to happen in 2026, as you can see on here, are FIFA, and FIFA World Cup games will be played from June 20th to July 4th. There's a lot of events that lead up to and after that. Welcome America will, of course, take place and be the main experience for July 4th itself and the weeks right up leading up to that. And then Major League Baseball is also will be here in July as well. So, and I should also point out that the city of Philadelphia has recently appointed, Mayor Parker has recently appointed Michael Numis, who is now the 2026 director. Under the previous administrations, there hasn't been an in-house mayoral appointee, and we're really thrilled that we now have someone at the mayoral level who's thinking about 2026. These are some of the signature events that I've already mentioned. There's already over 20 conventions planned for the year of 2026, which is very exciting because everyone wants to be here. This slide shows you some of the organizations that are thinking about what their own signature plans are going to be. Not all of these things are confirmed or filled up or funded yet, but some of them are, and some of them are already advancing their ideas. And the idea is that, again, the whole calendar year will have something that is significantly happening. And each one of these institutions are responsible for their own really unique programming. We like to remind folks that 2026 really starts in 2024. 2024 is the 250th anniversary of the convening of the First Continental Congress, which happened in Carpenter's Hall. It is also the 300th anniversary of the Carpenters Company, which so Carpenter's Hall has a number of events planned this whole year, and their Young People's Continental Congress is happening in July, where they're bringing representatives from all of the 13 colonies to have a convening, students have a convening in Carpenter's Hall. These are some of these guiding themes, as I was mentioning at the beginning, how I think stating your values and what's important to you as an organization helps set the framework for what you really want to focus on. And these 4 themes are reflective of the spirit of Philadelphia and the spirit of our place, and they help to inform some of the programming that we're doing and inspire programming that others might be using as well. Just a little bit more information about these 3 pillars where Philadelphia 250 is creating our own programs around. You can see on the program side, we have programs around civic engagement and storytelling. The place-based experience are going to be around these ideas of neighborhoods, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then the last piece is about legacy projects. And we have a number of different ways that folks can participate in a legacy project. In terms of programs, this is again where I was talking about us being a source and a resource, but as a source, one of our signature projects or signature programs that we're doing is called the Declaration Station. And it literally will be a big giant mobile stoop that will move around the city and be an opportunity for people to share opinions, express their ideas, make a declaration about how they want to see, what they want to see for the future of Philadelphia and the future of our country. So stay tuned for that. We're going to debut that in July. That's on its way. And then Programs for the 250th is it's a community of anyone who is planning an event or a program for 2026 that would like to be recognized and put onto the calendar. If you reach out to us and tell us what it is you're doing, we will include you in our materials, and you can be part of the promotion for what's happening in 2026. A key element, a key piece of what Philadelphia 250 is doing in terms of making sure that there's neighborhood activation is this idea of creating neighborhood gateways, or essentially these regional locations where people can come together to celebrate, to participate, and to invest locally at the neighborhood level. And you can see that we're hoping that there will be locations in every single city council district across the city. So this is truly a citywide experience. We're probably going to, from a geographical understanding, and for people to understand where things will be going on, we'll probably be thinking about the city in the sense of these different regions. And the idea is that there would be locations of business corridors and adjacent residential areas that would serve as hosts for programming sites in 2026. And we're primarily thinking that the weekends of April and May and September and October of 2026 would be the time in which these neighborhood gateways or these regional clusters of activities would happen. And these are opportunities when we will work with our partners, stakeholders that are in these regions, and work with our promotional partners like Visit Philadelphia to encourage there to be visitors and residents who go and basically really start to explore different parts of the city, invest in the local businesses, take tours of the cultural sites there, participate in the various things that are happening, and really start to kind of unearth some of these undertold places that we're not all aware about. And then ultimately, this is really about this idea of making sure that there's a true renewed sense of civic pride, that when you're going to Woodland Avenue in Southwest Philadelphia and visiting the folks who are part of Akana, and having an African meal or listening to African music that you otherwise wouldn't be exposed to. This is an opportunity to really, for all of us, to be better informed about the diversity of our history across the city and the various cultures and people that make up who we are as a city and as a country. So that's where we really want to make sure we're being inclusive and citywide. Some of the things that Philadelphia 250 is working on making sure that we are bringing to help activate these experiences will be, of course, promoting the programs that local historic and cultural sites are doing at those times. We have a project around public art projects that we're going to bring to the various gateways where you'll actually get to participate in some of the public art projects. Our declaration station will be moving around. We're looking at a model of really expanding the idea of the West Philly Porch Fest into something that could happen in each of these different regions across the city. And of course, then working with small businesses to make sure that small businesses have an opportunity to benefit from the economic investments that will be happening in the corridors and in the neighborhoods. Just a quick snapshot of what the year, and this is like with a pretty Philadelphia 250 focused lens on it. There will be some significant opening events that happen to kind of kick off the year in 2026, and then closing events to wrap up the year. As you can see here, we're imagining there to be things that are happening throughout the entire year, with the bulk of activities really happening in the neighborhoods in that April through October time period. So I'm going to wrap up here just with this idea of legacies and thinking about, how people often ask me, what does success look like for you in 2027? And what's most important to me in 2027 is that everyone who lives in Philadelphia or has come to Philadelphia truly felt like there was a unique experience in which they felt seen, they felt heard, they felt like they belonged, and that there were investments made in Philadelphia in our at a local level that help to move the city forward. So I think it's less about like big shiny objects and more about a spirit of a unified Philadelphia, making sure that things that would normally not be called to the center of attention are included, and that they're heard and they're belonged, and that there's investments in the future. So when we're looking at legacy, we have really three different ways that we're approaching this. First, we started with this idea of, and the first image that you saw on the screen was a celebration of our official legacies for the 250th. This is the first bullet point on here, where we identified three projects that were sourced from a public open call process of over 90 submissions and a 6-month incubation period with us, where we picked three projects that represent typically historically marginalized communities that would be front and center for the 250th. So those three projects are a tourism and storytelling program with immigrants on the 9th Street Market, a program with Special Olympics around making the city of Philadelphia the most inclusive city for people with disabilities, and a revolutionary action figures workshop program with Smith Memorial Playground, which is for children of color to imagine themselves as future change makers. So that is three separate projects that we're doing specifically for for the official legacies of the 250th. I'm sorry, I was behind a slide. These are the three projects that we selected, and we are helping to fund those projects, not in their entirety, but to some degree. We're also looking at this idea of equity impact projects in 4 key areas or sectors that need greater enhancement and investment and relate to the 250th. So specifically something around public space and environment and greening. This fits right into Mayor Parker's agenda of a cleaner, greener, safer Philadelphia in general. So doing an intensive tree planting program. We'd like to do that for something for 2026. We're working with the Enterprise Center around a small business program that will help ready small businesses to welcome visitors in 2026, and possibly even, if the funding for that goes well, make small grants to legacy businesses that will be essential at that service community anchors. And we want them to continue to thrive. So we're working with the Enterprise Center on that. There's an initiative that really, I believe, is really important that needs to be about the preservation of specifically African-American historical sites. So this is something I'd love to discuss further with the Preservation Alliance, but is a conversation we've started having with the Center for the Preservation of Civil Rights Sites, which is a nonprofit specifically targeted on preserving African-American sites. And then the Committee of 70 is working on an initiative to really increase civics and citizenship initiatives and voting for 2026 as well. So those are, again, investment projects that we believe will have lasting value beyond 2026 that can also be framed and conceived of and seen as legacy projects. And then the third aspect of how people, individuals or companies or organizations can get involved is through making a legacy pledge. And this is a campaign that we've just launched this spring, and in which we're asking organizations to make a goal, make a pledge that supports a goal that already aligns with a strategic priority that you're working on, that also addresses an important need in your sector and is something that you think you would get accomplished by 2026. This is an opportunity for organizations that might otherwise think, well, I don't know how I would participate in the 250th. It gives you a tangible connection to the 250th. The idea is that if we have enough of these pledges, we start to actually compound collective impact in certain either sectors or geographic areas of the city where we're starting to have impact for the 250th. It's an opportunity for you as an organization to leave a legacy. So if you have a pledge, this is an opportunity to be recognized and to kind of be noted in history as having contributed to the semi-quincentennial. The example that I like to tell people is that Habitat for Humanity has made a pledge to increase their the number of homes that they both build and repair for the 250th, scaling it up from over 100 a year to 250 homes for the 250th. This is part of their strategic growth plan. It's ambitious, but it's something that they plan to accomplish by 2026. So if you have the opportunity, you can share this with members of an organization that you're a part of. We encourage you really to think about what a legacy pledge for the 250th might look like. So I hope that this is a nice way for you to think about like all the different, the many different aspects that go into planning a major anniversary. Even when we have the best of intentions of starting many, many years ago, some of those things move forward, some of them don't. But there's still time. We have a great mayor, we have a leader at the city level now, and there's so many important organizations that have been working on this for a long time that collectively, if we all kind of come together and collaborate, I really do think that we can leave a positive impact and leave a positive legacy for the future of Philadelphia. And with that, I will share with you my contact information. You can feel free to email me directly. My email is right there on the screen. And if you haven't been to our website yet, it's Philadelphia250.us. If you go to our Get Involved forum, you can fill out the various ways that I suggested you could get involved with us. And you should certainly sign up for our newsletter too, so you'll know what's going on. And I will stop sharing the screen, and hopefully you're all still there. I can't tell.
Thank you so much, Danielle, for sharing with us so many things that we have to look forward to in 2026. I really appreciate it. I encourage attendees to add any questions to the chat. To start off, I really enjoyed learning about your approach, which sounds like it's very inclusive for all Philadelphians across the city and not, just focused on the colonial history narratives that people might think of when they think of 1776. Can you elaborate on how you are planning to balance which histories to bolster throughout all your various programming?
Yeah, well, for the most part, I think in many cases we are the stories and the histories that will be shared will really be those that historical organizations, museums, and partners want to put on themselves. What we're hoping is that we're creating a framework and really encouraging there to be it done in a very inclusive way. And we already know that that's happening, right? There's so many of the institutions in Philadelphia are just creating great exhibits even today. And I think that is probably not entirely unique to Philadelphia, but it's certainly something that is of important value here. And we're hoping that visitors who come to Philadelphia will take that away, that they're not just getting, a traditional historical narrative, that they're hearing things that are much more nuanced and multi-layered, and including Native Americans as well. I realize I didn't specifically call them out in my presentation, but it's hugely important that the Native American voice is also a part of, and events that they want to create and put on are also part of things that happen in 2026 as well.
That's really great to hear. I think that's really exciting. We have a question about the involvement of the Park Service and Independence National Historic Park in your planning.
Yeah, so there's a relatively new superintendent of the National Park Service, Steve Sims, who actually was a former employee there, so I know he's familiar with the national park. Philadelphia 250 as a nonprofit, we haven't really actively engaged on a lot of programming at the National Park Service because it's kind of outside of our scope. And now that they have a very ambitious capital improvement plan, they're working very closely with Independence National Historical Trust on the renovation of the First National Bank, the Second National Bank. They have some capital improvements that desperately need to be done with the Declaration House. I know that they're looking at that. The Declaration House, which is at 7th and Market, which is where it's a recreation building of where Jefferson wrote the Declaration. But they're working on exhibits and capital improvements to that. So I believe that the visitor experience will be improved by 2026. I don't know that they I know that they don't have all the dollars that they were hoping for by 2026, but I think they're on a great path. And I know they've been working closely with the Visitor Center in terms of what the 2026 experience will be like.
Great. And yeah, I'm excited about the new superintendent and seeing how the direction that will go. We have another question about the role of the city's historical commission in planning for the semi-quincentennial. Has there been any collaboration there?
We have connected with them relative to a program they have called Treasure Philadelphia. Is it called Treasure Philly? Maybe it's called Treasure Philly.
That was our last week's lecture that we had. So hopefully our attendees are familiar with it now.
Okay. So we've talked to them about that initiative because it's very much a part of like what we're really encouraging, right? Which is how are we preserving the stories that are potentially lost, right? Unless they're collected either through oral histories or through written histories. It's a very slow moving process, as you know, to really do it in a very thorough way. So I can't speak any more to it than that, other than I think their model is great. And as we start to identify where some of the neighborhood programming will be, we can connect back with them to make sure that to see what types of research they've already done in particular areas.
Yeah, I think that's a great synergy, the Treasure Philly. So I'm glad that's already on your radar because it really is. I think, hopefully the city will have more progress on it in the next 2 years, and that you'll be able to highlight and build on that work.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I know you touched on it a bit, but could you elaborate a little bit more, if you could, on the role of what the state commission is doing? Is there, what that collaboration looks like with the America 250 PA?
Yeah, so America 250 PA is responsible for planning activities or engaging all 67 counties. So there are different county organizations or commissions like Philadelphia 250, but in each of the separate counties. And then each county is essentially figuring out what they want to do for 2026, right? So it keeps it, it gets smaller so that you can actually have tangible and responsive programming relative to the stakeholders in those particular areas. The state commission's has created all of these county commissions, which are developing their programming. They have a statewide curriculum program for children, like K through 4. They have a veterans program. They have a tree planting program. Those things are citywide. Otherwise, the events are being planned at a local level. But you can go on their website and learn more about the various programs that they're doing.
Great, thank you. I was just interesting as you laid out the various actors that there's so much potential collaboration between the federal, state, and local. But it was interesting to note how the local was ahead of it all.
The local is ahead of it all. Mm-hmm.
Great. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat yet, but we still have a few more minutes. So if anyone has anything else, I encourage them to add. But Danielle, is there anything else? I know the pledge was really interesting that you just ended on, but was there anything else right now for people to get involved in the lead up to 2026 that they can be doing right now in 2024?
If you are part of an organization that produces or plans programming, whether it's a historic site or cultural organization, you can be thinking about what programming you might do or how you might tweak your existing programming to be slightly different for the 250th. So if you go to our website and go to the Get Informed form, you can register to tell us what your people's program is. Like that would be one way for people to get involved. I would definitely sign up for our newsletter. We have events. We just had an event last week that we had on the worst weather imaginable last Wednesday. We still had 65 people who showed up to tell us their ideas about neighborhoods and what they want to see out in the neighborhoods. So we have events on a pretty monthly basis. We have these virtual chats. So the first Wednesday of every month, there is a drop-in session in which one of my staff or myself host, and then we just answer questions in Q&A. So if you ever have like questions about something you're working on, or you want to know more about something, you can attend one of our virtual chats. I think on our Get Involved form, it's also, if you're interested in volunteering, we're going to be out and about in a lot of neighborhoods this summer and next summer, of course. If you have a street fair, if you have a civic association meeting, a community development committee meeting, and you'd like us to come and present or talk to your group, we can do that. So reach out about that. I would also say talk to your neighbors. Let people know that 2026 is coming. It's a big opportunity for the city. Talk to your city council folks. We're making the rounds, talking to every city council member. We want them to support this community-led citywide vision for the 250th. So if you like everything I presented today and you're in support of it, throw your weight behind it. Let your city council person know, because that of course helps with funding. It helps build political support and make sure that we can all have as a successful 2026 as possible.
Great. I'm so glad there are so many opportunities, because it's closer than we think. It might sound far away now, but I'm glad that hopefully we can amplify the voice a little bit here tonight and get people thinking about what role they can play and how soon it really is. It's really exciting, and it was really so interesting to hear your background and how you've been working on the Centennial District back in 2005 and how that brought you to now. It was really interesting. So thank you again. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. But at this time, I invite all of our attendees to unmute and give you a round of applause for a great presentation that was really informative. So thank you so much, Danielle. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It was great. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thanks, Danielle.